as a serious real estate portal in the year 2025, do you think you need things like neighborhood analytics? Well, yeah, you probably do. Do you need things like interactive staging on your listing photos? You probably do, or you will do very soon. And would it be nice to have things like, seamless furniture shopping on your portal and real-time renovation estimates? Yeah, they sound great. If you think that those things might be useful or are useful, or that you should have those things on your portal right now, you should talk to our sponsor, PropTex. That's PropTex with two X's. You can head to PropTex with two X's.com, or you can hit the guys up on LinkedIn and, well, obviously say that we sent you. And now on with the podcast. Hello and welcome to the PPW Pod, bringing you news, views, and interviews from the world of real estate marketplaces and PropTech. I'm joined for this news episode by Simon. How are you doing, Simon?
I'm doing very well, thanks. 6 o'clock in the morning, so thanks for the early start.
Well, I think you put it in the diary. Anyway, Harvey, how are you doing?
I know.
I'm all right. I had a bit of a lie-in this morning, Ed, as you well know. So I'm the opposite to Simon. Between the two of us, we've had one normal night's sleep.
Cool. So today's podcast is a news roundup. We will start probably with the biggest acquisition deal we will probably see this whole year. CoStar has agreed to acquire Domain for, I believe, $1.9 billion US. Harvey, why don't you fill us in?
Yeah, of course. So for those of you who've been living under a rock, Domain is number 2 in Australia, and CoStar is trying to sweep up as many number 2s, 3s, and 4s as it can. It submitted a bid worth about 1.8 billion US dollars, about 3 billion Australian. Earlier on in the year, Nine Entertainment Media. I can't remember which order the words go in. They basically said, up your offer. We're the majority shareholder in Domain, and we want a bit more bang for our buck. So CoStar delivered an improved offer from 4.2 Australian dollars to 4.43 Australian dollars per share, and in its recent quarterly filings, CoStar has confirmed that Nine has backed the deal, and now we need some shareholder approval later on this year. I think it's August, and we're currently in the due diligence stage. But at this point, I think it's fair to say that this one is a goer.
Okay, I want to ask you about this, Simon. You've been in a position like this before, I imagine. Just how high are the stress levels right now at both of these companies? And is there a big kind of imbalance on, who's stressed about what?
I think that the stress levels are right now a lot less than they were. Normally what happens is, and I've been involved in these scheme of arrangements. We've done 2 of them. One was when Lifel acquired Machula, and one was when MRI acquired the PropTech Group. They were both listed companies, and you go through what's called a scheme of arrangement. And actually, a bit of background for people. The scheme of arrangement says you've come to an agreement with the board about buying a business, board of a listed company. The board goes, yes, we think this is a great idea, and we're going to support it. But it doesn't mean it's going to happen, right? Because you need to have the shareholders vote for it. Now, what happens is then the courts, now because each individual shareholder is not going to read every minute detail, the courts, like as in the law courts, step in, and they basically have a lawyer, that the judge sits over the top and says, okay, have you done everything right? Have you got an independent valuation to say that this is a fair and reasonable offer? Okay, for the business and so on. And then then if the judge says okay, you then have to go through another process, which goes to all the people, every shareholder, make sure they've had a chance to review documents. You prepare a scheme of arrangement document, which is sort of like 132 pages outlining the business in absolute detail. So if you can get your hands on that, you'll find all about Domain and everything it's doing. And then the shareholders will vote on it again, and as long as 90% say yes, then the business is sold to CoStar, and then that goes back to the court again for the second hearing, and the judge goes, well, have you done the process, boys and girls? And you go, yes, we have, sir. And then they go, okay, fantastic, I approve this, and then it's approved and the deal is done.
But doesn't
But
it have to go through regulatory? I mean, there will be some.
and part of that could be a regulatory approval, what's called FIRB, Foreign Investment Review Board, just to make sure that they are comfortable that they're happy for a US company to buy this business. But I can't see why FIRB would have a problem in this process. So I don't think it's going to be an issue. And then clearly the biggest, what do you call it, stumbling block in the whole discussion is Nine, because Nine, the company Nine Media Holdings or whatever they're called, has a blocking stake, right? Because if you own more than 10%, you can kill the deal. So you've got to negotiate with them to get them to be in favor of it. So that's why you have both the board of Domain and the major shareholder saying, yes, we're in favor of this. They sign a binding agreement saying they're in favor. They're not going to vote against it. They're going to vote any shares they control for the deal. And that's how it basically gives it a great shot to go through. And I was just having a look before at the premiums, okay? And the premium on is basically, for all intents and purposes, of about 50%. Right,
Okay, so
on what it was trading before the deal was announced.
Pretty generous premium, right?
Premiums are normally in that 30 to 40% range, so it's a good premium, and I think valuable. But you've got to also understand the Australian dollar has gone down versus the US. Okay, so it's you've got to probably have to your best way to look at it would be in US dollar impact, and I don't think it would be as major an impact in US dollars. So, overall, the important thing now is for everyone. So the question is, are they stressed? The answer is a lot less, because the hardest part is getting to this point. Now it's a procedural matter. A lot of documentation, a lot of writing of scheme booklets. It's like, oh.
Okay. And the same week that this came out, I believe it was the same week this came out, REA Group, the big rival to Domain, delivered its Q3 results. Harvey, why don't you very quickly tell us what the kind of broad numbers were from REA's Q3?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, as always, REA Group is basically one of the most dominant portals literally on the face of the earth. And the numbers tend to follow that. You've sort of sprung this one on me, Ed. I didn't know we were going to go through REA's numbers.
I think I wrote this one actually, didn't I?
So I think you wrote this one. So actually, I'm going to delegate back to you, Ed. If you have the numbers in your head, then yes, feel free.
Revenue was up 12% year on year, and free cash flow was up nearly 20%, 19% year on year. So the point of all this is REA Group for now is still doing excellently well. I think one thing that's kind of interesting and that hasn't been mentioned, at least in what I've read about all of this, is what's going to happen to the kind of number 3, number 4 players, the like View Media Group, Homely, all of these. Simon, what do you think is going to happen to these guys? Are they just going to become, when CoStar comes in with all of this money, do these smaller guys just get blown out of the water? Are they looking to, I don't know, get acquired? What happens to these companies?
I could be cheeky and say, were they ever in the water? I don't think that they are. It's in a market where the structure is so well established and has been established this way for a quarter of a century. Right, it's been a long, long time. It's been this market structure. The numbers 3, 4, and 5 will continue to be 3, 4, and 5. They might change places. They'll earn a nice living out of it. They will, do what they have to do, but no one's going to. It's not going to change the game. The more important question is, can a CoStar-owned domain fundamentally chip away at REA? And I think the answer is yes. I think it's going to be very interesting. I think what will happen is that they will leverage their Matterport relationship to their advantage in this game. And I expect to see there'll be a few people at REA. My guess is a little bit nervous about the potential impact. And I think the one thing that is very rarely talked about is can a business who has a culture of, and I'll be a bit cheeky about this, wake up in the morning, put prices up, go back to bed. You don't have to do massive amounts of innovation. Yes, you'll spend a lot of money doing stuff, but at the end of the day, your market position allows you to really control what happens through just pricing. Is it prepared for a real dogfight with a company that is scrappy, is going to be innovative, who's got more in its DNA around fighting? If you think about it, CoStar has got Homes.com in the US, and they're fighting, right? They're taking on, they're doing innovative stuff, they're trying to make inroads, they're doing different things. We talked about this on a previous podcast. They're on the market, which we probably should come and have a different podcast about and see if we can get Jason on. Jason Tebb is the CEO. Are doing different stuff, right? Because if they keep doing the same stuff, you get the same result. So Domain is going to do something different. Can REA really cope in a dogfight situation? And how it responds will determine the impact that it has on both its share price. That hasn't changed for a year. I was just having a look here. Last 6 months, there's no real change in the REA share price. Over the year, there is. The last 6 months, it's been pretty flat. And in fact, it's 1% change. Okay, so I think that the market's in a bit of a wait and see mode now, and we will be talking a lot about it over the coming months as the deal goes through. The DNA changes within Domain and so on. Now, my feet on the ground out there are saying that people are leaving Domain at the moment. Okay, that people looking for jobs, really smart people, and so on. There's a bit of a brain drain occurring. And the reason I know is because I was talking to 2 or 3 people has smaller businesses, and they're getting a lot of people from Domain applying. So I think one thing that the CoStar team will have to do is steady the ship, refocus it, re-energize it, probably get rid of some of the business units that don't make sense, because Domain spent a lot of money on buying stuff. And I had someone the other day said, well, they're probably worth about 10 cents in the dollar, right? They just overspent on businesses. And I think so I think when they go through that sort of restructuring process, refocusing, and then getting the business plan really right. And the question is, what will that be? And I've got some views, so we'll do that in a different session later. Let's not talk about everything today. Then I think they can give REA a real run for its money, probably the same level of run for its money it hasn't had in 20 years.
All right. Well, we look forward to covering that for sure. We will stay with CoStar. By the way, we know that we cover CoStar a lot on this podcast and on.
Well, they're everywhere.
What I would say, if you're listening to this in, I don't know, Finland or South Africa or Chile, do something really interesting and we'll cover you. But what's really interesting at the moment is what CoStar is doing. We had the news recently that CoStar is to offer free algorithm boosts on homes.com to all of the listings that are set to be banned from Zillow. Harvey, why don't you fill us in?
Yeah, so this story has a couple of parts to it. The first thing is that we have the clear cooperation policy news in the US, upon which Zillow is very highly reliant for its stock. Zillow has come up with new listing standards and basically said, if you don't publish on the MLS within 24 hours of marketing a property, you can't list on Zillow. Now, at the same time, CoStar has been trialing a vendor-paid advertising product called Boost. And Andy Florence, being the sly dog that he is, has noticed a big opportunity here, which is anyone who feels like they've been punished by Zillow can come and use this new vendor-paid advertising product for free to help scale up the VPA product and also have a little dig at Zillow's market share. So this product, we reported on previously, said that people were willing to pay up to $500 to pay for. We've got new numbers here that say that actually the product ordinarily will cost $260, but now Andy Florence has said that anyone who's been burned by Zillow can use this product for free, and they will get all sorts of benefits about how their listing is published and prominently displayed on homes.com until the listing is sold or delisted, basically. So a bit opportunistic, but I think it's a pretty clever play actually by CoStar. I appreciate the forward thinkingness of Andy Florence on this one.
Yeah, this isn't. So we mentioned it in the context of vendor paid advertising, which I think that they've experimented with this product. But I don't think it's just vendor paid advertising. It is any agent that would like to boost a listing that they have without necessarily paying for a whole subscription can use this boost product. Simon, I think a few episodes ago, we were talking about this and you were saying Zillow's going to cave. Zillow hasn't caved. A lot of people seem to be coming out on Zillow's side. There really does seem to be like no one's sitting on the fence with this. Everybody, it seems, has a position on what's right, what's right and what's wrong. Is this a sensible thing to do?
Absolutely. Well, which bit?
To boost, for free listings that aren't on Zillow.
I would do it in a heartbeat, because what's the real cost to me? Zero, right? If it's what's the marketing upside amongst agents? Forget consumers, but amongst agents, it's enormous. It's basically saying, hey, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. We're not going to tell you how to run your business. Zillow is telling you how you're going to run your business, right? You don't have a choice. If you don't put it on them within 24 hours, you can never put that listing on them. You're telling me how to run my business. Okay. What happens if I don't want to do that? What happens if I sign it on a Friday and I go on holiday for 4 days and I've got an agreement and I'll do it some other time? It's like, don't tell me how to run my business. Okay. So, especially in America, the land of freedom and opportunity and entrepreneurship, why is a company telling someone how to run their business? Which I understand is what the point that people are making that are against it. I can understand why Zillow wants it. Zillow wants to make sure that it doesn't end up being a Me Too, right? An afterthought in the process, and it doesn't want to. So the question is, whose hat are you wearing? If you're wearing the Zillow hat, you're going to do this, right? Because you're going to leverage your market power. It's no different to Rightmove saying, I'm putting my prices up 10%, and anyone's got a problem, fill out the customer complaint form, right? Prices going up because the market is expecting all listings to be on Rightmove. They're expecting the listings to be on Zillow. Zillow wants to make sure it's got fresh results. So if I'm Zillow, yeah, I'm doing it. If I'm CoStar, I'm absolutely going to paint Zillow as the baddies here, and I'm going to be the good guy, and I'm in favor of the industry, and you can run your business the way you want to. And in fact, I'm going to give you a benefit. If you miss out over there, I've got something that I can give to you for free. So, of course, this is just natural competition in a market. And there'll be people who fit on both sides. The industry, of course, wants to have a nice little, because once again, they've had court cases last year, which is all about attacking their 6% commission. Okay. And they're finding ways around that, right? The court ruling was as I said the other day, there's a great New York Times podcast recently, about 3 weeks ago on it. You should listen to it. It talks about how the industry has found a way around the rulings of the court, because where the water always finds the lowest point, same concept, right? There's always going to be a way around these things. So my view is, depending on which hat you've got, depends on whose side you're going to be on. But if you're an agent, it's win-win. If you think about it, I'm on, if I've got a listing and I'm putting it up straight away, I'm on Zillow and homes.com. If for whatever reason I don't want to, I've still got homes.com and probably realtor.com that I'll be on anyway. And the only question we have to ask is, are serious home buyers only looking on Zillow? And if the answer is no, they're also looking on realtor.com or homes.com, then it may not even make a difference at the end of the day. It's just noise, right? Noise in the whole scheme of things. So anyway, food for thought. I don't have the answer on where the real home buyers are looking, but if someone ever has that bit of data, that is what really matters.
Okay, we will move on, but we won't move on from CoStar. I promise this is the last CoStar related story on today's agenda. There's more controversy about CoStar, this time in the UK. Harvey, why don't you fill us in on what's happened?
Yeah, of course. This is basically breaking news. This has only happened today, I think. So back in September 2024, CoStar owned On the Market said, "Hey, look at us. We've just overtaken Zoopla as the #2 portal by traffic in the UK." Now, that was paid for traffic mostly. It was only for 1 month, and they were pretty loud about it. They were so loud about it that Zoopla actually came out swinging. Zoopla actually came out and said, "What On the Market has done is basically false advertising. Be very careful about whether you listen to these claims or not." Now, we've now found out that the Advertising Standards Authority has come in and informally warned CoStar that this isn't the way to do things. CoStar has been told to withdraw any marketing claims that say that they are the #2 portal by traffic, and it's basically a slap on the wrist. In a big boxing match, a slap on the wrist doesn't really mean much, but the bloody nose are probably going to be coming in the next couple of years. But for now, it's a minor controversy, I think. Nothing major, but yeah, CoStar just with a little black mark against its name here for its misleading advertising claims about whether it's bigger than Zoopla.
Okay, this sounds quite a lot like the playbook with homes.com, right? You know you're at a traffic disadvantage, so you buy a whole load of traffic, and you're then going to shout about how much traffic you have, and probably ignore the kind of engagement metrics like bounce rate, etc., etc. If you keep doing this for long enough, eventually it will stick in people's heads, and you will own that #2 spot, at least in people's heads. Maybe not in reality; it's all kind of blurred. Is this a good tactic for a #2? It sounds like a very good tactic for a #2 because, at least to my mind, a little slap on the wrist from advertising standards is a small price to pay for kind of wedging yourself into agents' minds as, oh, okay, we're #2 now. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I view it is that claims of leadership, claims of more traffic than another player, and so on, have been going since the beginning of this industry. I always remember, true story, Casa.it in Italy and Immobiliare were having a massive debate about market leadership in must be 2011, 2012, so a long time ago now. And we even had at one of the PPW conferences, the CEO of Immobiliare get up on stage and say, look, they're claiming leadership, but let me show you how they do it. And what they were doing is every time someone went to Sky Italia news site, a pop-under would be launched for Casa. Okay? And he just said, look, here's what happens. Played the video, right, of this actually occurring. Yes, they had more traffic. Casa had more traffic. But the time on site, well, the problem was the time on site was actually quite long because it just sat in the background and the user didn't even know they had opened it, but the number of pages viewed was 1. Okay? And so there are always these games going on. There are always people buying traffic, whether it's on social media, whether it's on this one. It doesn't matter because it will continue to happen. I always remember we had I remember having a slide at a presentation, well, must be 10, 12 years ago now, probably longer, where I had 10 brands that it said this country's #1 real estate site. In fact, I think it might have been Italy at that point, is that 3 different players claimed they were the #1. Maybe it was India. I can't remember. It was one of those markets. And it was on the logo, right? So these claims have been going on forever. There will always be things like the Advertised Standards, ASA, who will come up, and from time to time these issues will go up. Yes, it will be a slap on the wrist, but people just get on with it. Okay, I don't think anyone in the industry is going to go, aha. Right, the 2 people who care most about this in this instance will be On the Market and Zoopla, and I think it's as they say yesterday, as today's fish wrapper, fish and chips wrapper. right?
You got there in the end, Simon.
Yes, I did. I knew it was the analogy was there. It's like old school. It's newspaper, that thing that no one reads anymore. Bottom line is, yep, okay. But what is important is, and I think this is the real message, is that on the market is getting under the skin of Zoopla. Okay? And if on the market's getting under the skin of Zoopla, then they're doing the job. And I think let's tie everything back we just talked about with homes.com, with its boost product, with on the market and advertising and getting under the skin, and now CoStar buying Domain. Okay, they are innovative. They are willing to push the boundaries. They are willing to give the little middle finger occasionally to the competitors. Like, I can do this, haha, right? That is what you want to see in an industry like this. That's what makes this exciting and interesting, and that's what gives them, as CoStar, the best chance to disrupt and to become a leader. Sitting back and doing what everyone else does and hoping like hell that something's going to change is not going to cut it. You need to be innovative. You need to try different angles and so on. And a podcast we're going to record shortly, and you're going to hear at some point in time when we build. It's all about building the REA Group. So I suggest you tune into that when we actually launch it. We're going to talk about some of the edgy things that we did to build the business. Right? We didn't take just a standard off the shelf, out of the box approach. We had to be innovative because we were fighting against traditional newspapers. Okay, and we had to do something different. We had to get the attention of the advertiser, or the agent in this case, and get the attention of the consumer. Okay, and that doesn't happen by doing the same old boring stuff. Okay, so no, honestly, if I look around the market and go, who do I like watching? It's CoStar, because it's always something interesting happening. They're always pushing the boundaries. They're always trying to think about things differently. They've got Matterport now, so they're going to leverage that. I think it is an absolute breath of fresh air into this industry.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that.
And you've got 26 minutes of podcast
26 minutes of CoStar content. We need to move on from CoStar. We'll move on to something a bit more thematic. We have covered recently a few different instances of merger and acquisition deals where essentially a mortgage business and a marketplace business have been combined. So I'm thinking of, Redfin being acquired by Rocket is the kind of big one in the United States. There's also been one in Australia recently. Harvey, could you fill us in on this?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ed. So the mortgage brand, which is called Aussie, has launched a new listings platform called Aussie for Agents. And Aussie for Agents has been built in partnership with Listing Loop, which is a marketplace business technically not a marketplace business because it's a specialist in off-market properties.
It's an off-marketplace business.
It's an off-marketplace business. So now we have a mortgage broker working specifically with the data set of properties that are not on the market in Australia. I don't know exactly what the business is, whether it's a merger, whether it's a partnership, whether it's a joint venture. We've not quite got the details yet. I think we're going to try and get Listing Loop on the podcast in the near future, actually, to talk about the deal in more detail. But we now have real estate agents are going to have access to millions of buyers and sellers without vendor paid advertising costs. So there's the differentiation. Because it's off market, you're not having to pay to advertise your property. So a nice little niche in Australia, Ed.
Yeah, thanks for that. So that's one that's happening in Australia. There's obviously the Redfin deal. There's another one that was, I think, announced yesterday afternoon in the US. Movoto is the name of, if it's not familiar to you, it doesn't have to be. It's the number 5 or number 6 real estate portal in the US. And it's just been bought out by another mortgage company called Lower. So you've now got in the US this kind of Redfin Rocket, marketplace plus mortgage platform, I guess we'll call it. You've got Zillow's super app, which is, again, marketplace plus mortgage platform. And now you've got this one, Movoto, or the parent company Ojo Labs, with Lower, this marketplace plus mortgage platform. What's kind of interesting about this as well is, obviously there's enough of a enough hype behind it for three different companies here to be formed doing essentially the same thing. But what's interesting is that Zillow's mortgage business, which for a long time wasn't doing particularly great, has kind of started to pick up. So in Zillow's latest quarterly filings, they actually made a profit. Why don't you tell us about that, Harvey?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Zillow, like we've had a go at Zillow for a long time for not being a profitable business. I think we even spoke about it with Mike Del Prete a few weeks back. Is Zillow a profitable business? And he said, well, how do you define profitable? Well, for the sake of our reporting on online marketplaces, we use the profit and loss accounts, and it's always had a little bracket around it to mean that we're making a net loss. Zillow turned a net profit of $8 million for well, I think that might be the first time it's ever been profitable, actually, from what
No,
I can
it's the
remember.
first time for quite a few years, but not ever.
Certainly since iBuying, the iBuying debacle and post COVID. So yeah, I mean, it was quite a big turnaround as well. I think it was a turnaround from about a loss of plus $30 million loss, maybe even as high as 60 million, to turn it into a net profit. So, and the thing is, as you say, Ed, it's all being built off the back of improved mortgages and an improved rental segment as well. So it's sort of we're moving slightly away from focusing all our revenue from residential or residential sales, and now we're looking at more mortgage and rentals income.
My question for you here, Simon, is as somebody who has actually, lives sometimes, you're in the US right now, you're in a house in the US right now, which you will have acquired at some point. Does this make everything a lot easier to have everything on one platform, or are we talking about something that actually the consumer may or may not find really useful here?
Well, I think first of all, you understand how houses are bought and sold in the US. Most people will buy a house. Well, selling a house is like everywhere else. You get an agent, okay, and then unlike everywhere else, the agent shoves this into an MLS. And I would probably, if I'm buying a house, I would engage an agent to work for me. Okay, and the agent basically looks at the MLS. I know because when I bought this place about 4 or 5 years ago, they sent me listings from the MLS. They didn't send me links on Zillow or anything else. They just sent me links to either their site or basically the MLS data. And I could see the properties on my phone and go, yeah, yes, no, whatever. Okay. So there's very much an industry that's very entrenched in the way it operates. Okay. And then around that, you've got the Zillows, the homes.com, realtor.com, and so on, where people, before they engage an agent, will start their search. They'll be looking around, what's on the market, what's this worth, what's that worth, and so on. But eventually they engage, more often than not, an agent, okay, in that process. So does this make it easier? No, I don't think so. I think it adds more information, more data. And as we move from human being buyers agents to agentic AI-driven buyers agents, and there's a whole podcast I'd like to do on that one and we've got to get Malcolm McCallion back on because he and I are having some fantastic discussions about the future of agentic buyers agents. Okay, and that's I think there's something super big opportunity there. I think you just basically the reason these portals are doing this is that they have more data available, and the more data you've got available, the better or easier it is for the agentic search to find the specific answer to Harvey's specific question about a house that he may want to rent or buy in that process. And then I was just having a look at the detailed Zillow numbers, and what you're talking about here is the net income, okay, which is sort of as 8 million. They've always had that their EBITDA, right, which is which they do as a revised EBITDA has been positive for a while. So bottom line is that they have sort of turned a corner. But if you also have to think about it, when you're doing even at their EBITDA level 80 million on 600 million, that's an EBITDA rate of 12%, more or less, a bit more, 14%. you're looking at people like Rightmove at 70-odd%, 75%. You're looking at REA Group around the 50s. You're looking at the other big European players in the 50s, 40s, 50s. There's a long way to go before Zillow unleashes the potential of being a market leader. A long, long, long way to go. And the other thing you got to look at here, right, is the total revenue. If you go back a year, you say, what was the revenue back in the first quarter 2024? Was 530 million. In the first quarter 2025, 598 million. It's a good growth, but not massive growth. And it's gone. And in fact, if you look from the third quarter, which is 581 to 598, it's not much of a growth. So then really what they've done is they're stripping out some costs in the business to make it look a bit better. Operating costs were down from $500 million per quarter to 468. So they've stripped out a bit of the cost, and that's how you sort of move across the line. You're possible, but for me, this is break even as a business.
Okay, we'll move on. We'll move on from Zillow in the US. We've had a lot of that. We will move for our last story today to India, where there's been a bit of controversy with Magic Bricks, one of the kind of three or even four kind of competing portals in India. Harvey, why don't you tell us what's happened?
Yeah, sure. So in the same way that in the US we have a National Association of Realtors, we've got the same thing in India. And the president of India's National Association of Realtors has instructed all members to discontinue all listings and advertisements from Magic Bricks until the portal operator apologizes for videos published online. So we had some social media post. I did see it. I can't remember exactly what the ins and outs were, but basically it was a bit of a dig at brokers and agents in India, saying that they're time wasters, they're slow, they're inefficient. And the NAR of India has basically said, well, that you're completely undervaluing the importance or the foundational role that agents and brokers play in India. Let's not be rude about them in your advertising, and we expect better from one of our major portals, basically. So if I could share a quote, Sumanth Reddy, chairman of NAR India, said this is not just about a single campaign, it's about years of silent undermining finally being called out. Brokers are not optional participants in Indian real estate. They are the backbone. Platforms must recognize and respect that. This directive is a collective stand for dignity, fairness, and the future of our profession. So, nice big controversy in India, Ed.
Yeah, thank you, Harvey. This is, I think, interesting for a couple of reasons. It's what was interesting for me was that Magic Bricks blamed it on a rogue intern or something. But having seen the post, it looked like it would have needed an intern plus maybe some other people to help them make it. I wanted to talk about this because it's quite similar to a situation we had in Brazil a few years ago. Where something very similar happened with Grupo Zap, one of the big portal operators in Brazil, and they blamed it on an quote internal process error. Right now, I don't know. That's suitably vague. Have there been any similar cock-ups in PR and communication that you can remember, Simon? Because both of them actually seem really quite big for big real estate portals to do, because the Indian one in particular was really quite, I saw it was quite disparaging about agents and
quite outspoken, wasn't it?
Yeah, you sort of think there's no way that it was just an intern that published that.
What an own goal. Leave it at that, right? Okay, wake up in the morning. Who's your customer and who's going to pay you? Oh, it's the real estate industry. Why don't we attack them? That sounds like a good idea, doesn't it, boys? Let's go do that.
I might have misinterpreted this. I think there's some like FSBO product that they were trying to market in doing.
Yeah, but unless it's a material part of your business, I'd be like, hey, if I was advertising an FSBO product, I'd be saying, looking to sell your house by yourself, advertise it on, in this case, Magic Bricks. However, we recommend you use one of the market-leading real estate agents who advertise with us. Okay, so you turn it into a lead generation tool, and if they still want to do it themselves, you make money in that process. What you don't do is ever attack your customer. Now, you may get frustrated and annoyed and pissed off at them because they don't make decisions quick, or they keep wanting to push the prices down, or whatever, right? Well, that's business. But that's a typical own goal. Okay, and when you've got the industry against you, it does make life a lot harder. And I'm going to tell this story in our REA Group podcast that we're
If
about
you've got
to.
any stories about any naughty interns or
Yeah. Well, no, not a naughty intern, but
for
something.
the next one.
But no. I'll do a teaser.
All right.
Okay. All right. Teaser is the following. When REA was in its very early days, talking about 2001, 2. It was not liked by the industry, and it was not liked by the industry because they didn't have control over the business. Okay, they wanted to control the advertising, control the messages, and we were going around saying, "Hey, look, you should advertise on REA." And one franchise group, LJ Hooker, I think after 20 odd years, I can tell the story and name names. And the gentleman who was running it then is no longer running it. Was actually sending out faxes. Now, Harvey, Ed, a fax is a traditional way of communicating to someone else. Where paper goes in a machine and pops out the other end another place. Okay, sorry, young guys. Okay, fax machine. Right, and they were sending out these letters on the fax machines, and I've got it actually downstairs here. I've still got it. And it had dripping blood down the page, and it said, "Do not advertise on REA. They are going to kill the industry. They're going to close down all the agencies," and all this fear. Like, sound like any politicians in countries that you know of, right? And we had to find a way to fight that, okay? Because you otherwise they define the message, but they chose that path, right? And that was where we had an antagonistic marketing. So then, of course, we said, well, hey, how are we going to market against this? So we then got quite aggressive in our marketing back at them. But what we had that they didn't have was a very large audience. Okay, so we leveraged it. But we were certainly not attacking them in an aggressive way or a mean way. But we were saying, look, if you're not advertising on us, you're not being seen. If you're not being seen, you're not maximizing the outcome. Go talk to your real estate agent. Okay, go talk to the real estate agent and ask them to put your listing on REA. Now, you've never seen more agents who were anti-you turn to pro-you, or at least begrudgingly pro-you, because they didn't want to piss off their customer in the process. So there are smart ways of doing it, and then sometimes there are less than smart ways of doing it. Anyway, more stories coming up. Listen to the REA history podcast.
Yeah, we'll save the anecdotes for that one. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Cheers, Ed.
Thanks. Bye-bye.